Welcome to the video podcast of Silicon Spice, where tech leaders share life's flavors. And today we have Michael here. So we're also at Stanford campus. Michael, you graduated from Stanford with a PhD in bioengineering, and then you started your career in startups, and then you spent 4+ years at Google or Verily Life Sciences as a staff hardware engineer. And now you're the VP of the new platform at Cepheid after almost 5 years there. So to be honest, I haven't heard of the company much. But then I looked it up, that you guys did amazing work doing the COVID rapid testing and stuff. So it's actually a pretty big biomedical engineering company. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Yang.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity.
So my first question is, what is your path into kind of biotech leadership? Was every move of your career intentional?
Yeah, that's a super good question. Maybe I'll take a step back and say my path into even biotech was never fully intentional.
Okay.
And ever since ever since school, right? I mean, I've always been motivated by science.
Yeah.
Love learning about it, love doing it. I love to build things. And I think my career has been pretty much entirely motivated by a mission-driven mindset.
Okay, mission.
I've worked in startups, worked in big companies. Every time I've made a move, it's usually because I felt like the mission was worth spending time on. And I'm the type of person that loves to get obsessed over a problem. And so when I get my head into a certain type of topic or problem that I try to solve, that keeps me incredibly motivated. And I think your question on leadership, that there's a lot of different avenues I can elaborate on regarding that. I mean, there's technical leadership, which is I think a little more straightforward in terms of becoming a subject matter expert in a certain field and applying your knowledge to things. There's also people leadership, and something that I've just sort of naturally fallen into, in addition to enjoying building things and science and things like that. I've sort of just fallen into people management as well. And that's mostly because I slowly found myself having a lot of joy in being a cheerleader.
Yeah, empowering people.
People.
That's true.
I find a lot of satisfaction in coaching as well. So, I actually just a few years after I started working for the first time, I was given an opportunity to manage, and that was my first taste of it. I still got a chance to do a blend of both science and also people leadership. But over time, the opportunities kept coming along and continued to enjoy it. So I kept going down that path.
So it sounds like you have the engineering mindset, right? You want to solve the problem. And then along the way, there were people management opportunities, and you kind of enjoy the ride, kind of keep going. And then that's how you end up in kind of the people leadership.
And I think, your question, I get that every once in a while. It's like, how did I architect, path to right where I am now. And the simple answer is that I didn't. I think I've been very lucky, to be very fair, but I've also just found myself following certain passions, mission driven. Like I work in medical device. I think especially in that case, it's a little easier to find personal motivation for doing what I do.
That's true.
And I think it's also easy to recognize that the people who have the most satisfaction in being a cheerleader kind of naturally fall into sort of these categories of doing more people leadership.
Yeah, I think definitely I can relate to that, even though I'm not a people manager. But I feel like the impact you have in the leadership level, you really coach others and make people get better and stuff. So that's different than being an IC versus kind of the impact level is different. Yeah.
And one thing too, to also kind of bridge those two worlds, I would try to think about when someone is approaching you with maybe a technical breakthrough or something some problem that they solve. Are you the type of person that gets excited with them? One, you understand the significance of the problem they solved.
Right.
And you're just incredibly happy for the person that you knew how hard this problem was and they were able to solve it. And you're there to just like give them a high five. I think that's often like a litmus test of like, oh, okay, maybe like being a people leader is something that you would enjoy.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's a good, almost like a personality test, right? Like, do you want to solve the problem, or you want to also bring people along to solve the problem together? Almost. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have an amazing track record. Kind of right now, you're a VP of a major public biotech company, and previously you have spent time at Google and also 3 years at the infamous Theranos. So what are some key lessons that were takeaways you have from these companies? I would imagine the things you learned from that startup versus everything else is quite different. So I'd love to hear more about it. Yeah,
maybe I'll first start with Theranos. It's something that I can't hide from. Yeah, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Yeah. I'm very, very much motivated by the mission. At the time, this was, I think, 2012, 2013 timeframe. Elizabeth Holmes was just kind of starting to make a few waves, right, in the industry. I had an opportunity to meet her. It is very true about her ability of her amazing charisma.
Yeah, right? She does have that, right?
When you're talking to her, it definitely can make you believe you can change the world. It was very encouraging and motivating. Yeah. And that's kind of really what brought me there. I spent 3 years there, overseeing a lot of product design initiatives, blood collection and cartridge design and things like that. I was also earlier in my career, so there's a couple of takeaways. Definitely I think I was impressed with the opportunities that it provided me, nonetheless, to grow. Yeah. It was a company that, was self-styled as this sort of community of inventors and rule breakers and stuff. And so it was like, it was a place where you could experiment. You were encouraged to do so. So, there's a lot of learning aspects to it in that. But, I also learned a lot about culture and the roles that your leaders play. Right. Yeah. Overall satisfaction, your overall motivation. So, while I was very much excited about the mission, the environment, it was extremely toxic. My manager was Sunny Balwani. I think just learned a lot about, what are the right and wrong ways to keep people motivated. I think that it was much more of a fear-based kind of environment. And so at the very least, it has helped me see kind of like the darker side of some management styles. It can say like, I know what not to do.
So you've seen a really bad toxic examples, okay, I'm going to stay away from that side as much as possible.
Yeah. And I mean, I think maybe abstracting that out a little bit is just like understanding the role of psychological safety, when you're in a position of leadership, and how do you, the things you say, the things you project, and creating a space where people can actually be themselves to enjoy it, and kind of contrasting that to some of the other places I've worked. I mean, I think Verily, Google Life Science, right, was a place I eventually also got to. It was very much the opposite. Especially Google culture, right? It's very much about empowering, the associates. I think technical people love it also because it's kind of like run by the engineers.
Yeah, it's an engineer-centric culture. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What about Cepheid? Now you're in a different position compared to like earlier in your career.
Yeah. So Cepheid was for if most people have never heard of Cepheid, right? But we've actually been around for over 20 years. Okay. Yeah. We sell diagnostic products where they are used to detect infectious diseases, and we sell mainly to hospitals, and we have very high sensitivity tests for a lot of diseases, like some of the common ones like flu, RSV, COVID. Oh, okay. As well as other things like hospital-acquired infections, sexual health, and even some cancer tests as well. And again, going back to being mission-driven, in 2020, as the pandemic was starting to come onto the world stage, I had a lot of friends there and got a call to see if I wanted to go to Cepheid and see if I can support some of the efforts. And Cepheid, as we've actually made a pretty big name for ourselves in respiratory testing, prior to the pandemic. And as COVID hit, I mean, we were really, I think, at the right place at the right time. Our company was actually the first to get an emergency use authorization from the FDA to go and market a COVID test for point of care applications. Right. Okay. I mean, so that, being part of this company that does that, it was just incredibly satisfying. So again, mission driven, and I had very privileged role to help work on new technologies, because I feel like the pandemic was interesting as in that it accelerated a lot of thinking about like, how do you enable more medical or clinical based testing in places outside the hospital.
Like democratize the kind of testing.
Right? And that's something that's very central to what our company does. So getting to work on technologies like that, as well as even going the other direction for testing for complex care. So right now I lead some new platform development there to kind of look at what are the technologies that we want to bring to kind of build on now this awareness now of the importance of testing for infectious disease.
This is really cool. Recently, I read Malcolm Gladwell's new book called Revenge of the Tipping Point. And then it talks about actually COVID. There are a few super spreaders. Like those people can achieve the tipping point that will make, like 200,000 people get infected eventually over the course of a few weeks.
Yes.
So definitely really crazy. And I think it's amazing that you're in the center of innovation, that hopefully no more coming back soon, but you guys are doing the work to make sure people are aware that they have this respiratory disease, and then prevention, I guess, is the next step.
Yeah. I mean, for a lot of these types of diseases, I mean, I'll use flu as a very common example.
Yeah.
If you actually get a diagnosis early enough, there are clinically actionable things you can do. Tamiflu, COVID, you have Paxlovid. There's a lot of other things that you can do, but it starts with diagnosis.
Everything starts with diagnosis. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's amazing. What does a typical day look like for you? I understand, as a VP of a major biomedical device company, every day is different. But if you had to describe, there was a typical day. I'm curious, what does that look like?
I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier about being a cheerleader. And I mean, if I really want to distill it down into kind of one of the key things I would see myself accomplishing on a regular basis, a lot of it is helping make decisions. I'm not the only one making decisions, but I want to be someone who empowers people to do so. And so that's why being a cheerleader is so important, right? Finding those subject matter experts, bringing them together in a room and creating a culture and environment that helps people be open about.
They feel safe to talk about. Yeah, I love that.
And encouraging people to come together, do the thing, right? And there's a lot of hard decisions that have to be made, of course, right? Not everything's easy, but I think a lot of my job is to help clear out the noise, empower people, and in some cases too, right? Like offer opportunities to escalate problems above maybe where they are able to control, and bring awareness to certain problems that we have to do. So, I mean, on the surface, it looks like a lot of meetings and talking, but that's at least how I see it is like helping people clear out roadblocks and encouraging them to apply the things that the skills that they have to do their jobs. I think of myself as the opposite of a micromanager.
Hey, that's good.
But I think that's it's maybe a little cliche to say that, but I do believe that, we hire people to be excellent at their jobs.
Let them do that. So your team has the high agency to get in power, have the freedom to explore. And also you mentioned your team is also the new platform development. So that's literally the place to be if you want to use their skill. That's awesome.
Yes.
Would you say you spend most of the time, I guess there's like decision making, that's a certain chunk, like recruiting, and then there's like people management, like one-on-ones, skill development. Okay. Oh yeah.
And there's some leaders more like myself that tries to get to know the associates and adapt to their styles.
Okay,
right?
That's amazing.
And, some people like to have the one-on-ones because that's kind of made for them an easier place to
check in.
Open. Some people just hate the meetings and just prefer group meetings instead. For me, if you're asking about like how I connect and how do I do the things I need to do, right? Like it's a blend, so for some people, right, like the one-on-ones are the most effective, and others where it's like more of a group or a larger setting. So, just it's more about like spending the time, getting to know the people that you work with, and finding like their strengths and really trying to pull on those threads.
Yeah, that's awesome. I went to a conference where Jensen Huang talks about he has 50 plus reports and he doesn't do one-on-one because he felt like everybody can learn something from everybody else. So they would just have this, 50 plus people in one room, and then he would get feedback. So everybody else would also learn. So that's one style. Yeah.
And really it depends on the culture of the company and kind of what you need to get done. I think, certainly in your example, Jensen Huang's direct reports are all, I'm sure, extremely competent,
right, that's true.
independent people.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
The need for them to have kind of specific one-on-ones with the CEO. I mean, I think that's, it's dependent on the situation, right, of what they needed to get done.
Yeah, it's also a case by case, right? Yeah, with the company culture, and the level they're at, they're already top of their fields. They don't need to have like one-on-one to further. Yeah, I love that. I think it sounds like you're the kind of leaders that you want to make sure the team is comfortable to whatever style they prefer, whether it's a group setting or one-on-one. Yeah.
I mean, the important thing, what are the problems you're trying to solve, right? And how are you going to create the organization to make it work? So that's also the kind of stuff that I think about.
Yeah, definitely. The next question kind of related to this domain, right? So I'm an e-commerce product manager, and in product world, there are people in chosen different domains like cloud, AI, security, like healthcare, or health tech. I think is another domain. So what are some tips you have for people who want to transition or get started in biotech? And it sounds like these people I don't know if they should have a PhD, in biomedical or bioengineering, but what are some, in this like medical engineering field, what are some tips for them?
Yeah, super good question. And I get that a lot. One thing I absolutely love about my industry is the diversity.
Okay.
I mean, think about just what goes into making a medical device.
Yeah.
And I'll give you the example of a diagnostic test. You need to know your biology, your chemistry, mechanical engineering. You're going to need some electrical engineers to do sensors. You're going to need data people to interpret results and put things into a cloud.
That's true.
And feed things back into a hospital record system. All sorts of and a million other things, right? That's just the technical piece, right? And then you still have the typical commercialization engines, right? And go to market.
Yeah.
You have all those similar types of functions. So I'd say it's honestly not that hard.
Okay.
If someone was interested in doing this sort of thing. In the case of a product manager, you're still, it's a different industry, of course.
Yeah, it's more hard.
I'd say think less about the role itself, but think more about like what it is that you want to do. And the domain knowledge is something that, I mean, sure, like being experienced is very helpful, but that doesn't mean there's no chance for you to get into a role like this. Networking plays a big part of this, and knowing people that understand your capabilities and what you are interested in is really key to the whole thing. I mean, if you go into it with a very open and growth mindset, if you're driven by the mission, you'll learn the things that you need to learn.
Right.
Especially, with things like, the internet and AI, right? There's a lot of opportunities to learn and build up on the things that you need to do. Of course, there are aspects of healthcare that, you do need specialized domain knowledge, but that's not everything.
Yeah. So it sounds like people, first, they have to have the curiosity, right? Some foundation, a little bit technical, so then they can kickstart easier. And then more importantly is having that growth mindset. It's a continuously evolving field, right? There's always new regulations. There's new technologies coming up every year. I would imagine, I think similar to AI, the people who work in, medical devices, there are like so many papers to read every year. There's always something new.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, if you're willing to learn.
Right,
there's definitely no shortage of opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Now we get into kind of one of my favorite sections of this interview, because since I work at Stitch Fix, I got my sweater, my jeans from Stitch Fix. I have a new box every other month. So that's my gift to myself. And then it was also nice that for employees, we have 40% discount. So that's a really good benefit. So I'm curious, what is your favorite clothing brand? What's your favorite style? It doesn't have to be a specific brand. I would imagine working in kind of biotech, you guys have to dress a little more formal than in tech. I don't know. Yeah.
Good question. I wouldn't say there's a certain type of style uniform. I think it's, being in Silicon Valley, right? It is definitely less formal than than maybe the East Coast. I think, rather than saying like a specific brand, we'll say maybe the older I get, the more functional I tend to be. The less I think about the brand itself. I confess I do shop at Costco.
I love Costco.
A lot of clothes, and I wouldn't say there's a particular brand, but going back to the idea of functionality, shopping at places like REI and Sports Basement,
Yeah.
getting those, clothes that's both comfortable and keeps you warm, right? Those
Right,
kind
yeah.
of things that I enjoy, like the North Face jackets or
Yep.
Arc'teryx brand stuff. So those are always fun to wear. But I wouldn't say I have a go-to brand
Yeah.
for a lot of my clothes.
I hear you. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of like those big logos, I think I like kind of down to earth, again, functional, simple, like kind of
Right.
style. So I don't have to think too much.